Okay, alrighty. So, um, I'll just say welcome again. Hello, everyone. Um, today's clinic is going to be focused on strategies for learning dressage on your own. Without an instructor explaining things and also commanding moves for you. And then at the very end, like the last like 10-ish minutes, we'll also look at how you can apply new content you've learned to your own instructing, if that's something that you'd like to do. So feel free to ask questions throughout in the stage chat like you guys have been doing, or if you have comments, just throw them in there. There's also time for questions at the end of the clinic. So if you're just listening intently the whole time, and at the end you're like, oh, I do have a question, you can throw it in at the end there. And then I am recording, and I will upload the recording after the clinic, and I will share a link to that and also the slideshow if you'd like to reread through it as well. Okay, let's get started. All right, so we're just gonna have the agenda here. So this is just like a brief overview of the topics that we'll be looking at today. So we're gonna start with what learning strategies you can use to help with your learning by on your own. What are the things that you can learn by yourself, and what things do you really need others there in order to learn them, dressage wise. We'll talk about how you can track your progress. So how can you keep yourself like motivated over time? And then as you're learning new things by yourself, how can you transfer those new skills to your clever team? So like we talked about it earlier, most people are familiar with the SSD dictionary, but if your clever team has its own unique terms for things, or maybe describes moves in different ways, as you are learning, you want to think about how do I translate what I'm learning so that it makes sense for my clever team. And then the last little bit will be uh, how do you bring these new things you learn to your instructing if you do instruct. All right. Okay, let's start with learning strategies. Here we go. All right. What I would encourage you to think about is look at what learning strategies have worked well for you in the past. So, this could be academically in a school setting. So, for example, if you study with flashcards or like other forms of quizzing yourself, like a Bookit or a Kahoot, does that help you memorize stuff or like help you learn? Like note taking, so like writing in your own words. So, for example, if you're looking at SSD's dictionary or maybe another Clever Teams dictionary and you're reading what they've written out, try to rewrite it in your own words if you can, because that helps you remember better. You can also, when I was first learning, what I found very helpful is I would draw my own diagrams, and that would also help me understand uh, how the move worked, where I needed to be for what section of the move, etc., etc. And then can you teach the material to someone else? So like maybe it's another friend who plays Star Stable, or maybe you just capture a family member or a pet or a friend and be like, hey, you're gonna sit on the couch here or next to me at my desk, and I'm gonna explain to you this thing that I learned on my Pixel Pony game. So yeah, what kind of things have worked well for you in the past in terms of learning? Or maybe you really got into a hobby, like for example, you wanted to learn how to like crochet, and what kind of things helped you learn that hobby? So like maybe it was like watching a video tutorial where somebody goes step by step. This is how you crochet. So maybe for dressage, it could be watching YouTube videos. Like there's a lot on YouTube of like how to do this move, like what things you should look for, um, et cetera, et cetera. That's an option. And then I think what's essential here too is think about like when you were learning a new hobby, how much time did you spend on it? Because I think what a lot of people maybe forget is it takes time to become good at something. So don't expect yourself to become a pro right away. You need to build a skill over time. So like if you think about past hobbies that you really loved and how much time you spent doing them, like okay, I want to put aside maybe like an hour or two each week to practice dressage by myself. Or maybe that's not feasible. Maybe you're really busy. You go, okay, 30 minutes each week, I'm going to try to practice dressage by myself. And then slowly over time, you will get better. Um, so how can you apply these strategies to learn dressage on your own? We kind of already talked about that. Um, but like, yeah, you can make flashcards to quiz yourself. So for example, you can use like an app or a website, or you can make them with like actual note cards. So you could have like the name of the move on the front and then the definition on the back, and you try to remember the definition from the move name, or vice versa. You look at the definition and you try to remember the move name. Or you could have the diagram on one side, like just a visual representation like this here, and try to remember what this is. And then the name is on the other side with the definition, for example. So trying to like help yourself memorize stuff, because I think that's a big part of dressage is trying to remember all these concepts so that when an instructor is explaining things to you in your clever team, for example, you can go, oh yes, I already know what you're talking about. I have learned this thing. Let's keep going. Uh, Especially as you get into like more complex dressage, if you can remember things better, it will be easier for you down the line because the instructor won't need to stop and re-explain. But that's also fine too. If they do need to stop and re-explain, that's totally normal as well. Like you can't be expected to remember every little thing that exists in the world of SSO dressage. Another thing too that you can think about is what styles of instructing have you found the most engaging in the past? So if you think about your previous instructors, which ones did you find most helpful, and what about their teaching did you enjoy? And then can you use similar methods by yourself? So for example, if you had an instructor who provided a lot of diagrams and you're like, oh, I really like those diagrams, I found those very helpful, can you like prioritize looking for resources that include diagrams? Can you draw diagrams on your own? So like I made this one in Canva, but you don't have to make a fancy one. Again, you can just draw on a piece of paper. Like if you have lined paper or graph paper or like dotted paper, you can just draw on that. Or if you have like a tablet or whatever, you can take the image of the arena top down and draw on that if you find that helpful. Um, or say you had an instructor who used a lot of analogies. So like for example, if they explain like a B curl is a trot curl followed by a canter curl. You can think of like the trot curl is like the head of the bee, and then the canter curl is the body of the bee. So if like analogies like that help you recall what a move is in relation to its definition, you can kind of think, okay, as I learn new moves and I'm learning like how they work, can I come up with my own analogies so it helps me remember and memorize stuff. So those are some two examples, but just think about your past instructors, what you found most helpful in terms of their teaching. How can you apply it to your own learning? All right, the next big one is how can you improve memorization? I think this is a big one for a lot of people. So I would highly encourage you to break moves down into smaller sections, especially like the longer ones where they have several parts. Can you break them down even more? So like even like with a keyhole, you can break that down even more. Like it's essentially a curl over plus a comb going in the same direction. Uh, so you can even like break stuff down like that. You could break it down to its atoms. And then if sometimes in definitions they'll say, oh, you're going to, for example, curl in the direction called and curl in the opposite direction for like a curl fate, for example. If that sort of wording is confusing to you, just specify right, left. So for example, if you did a curl fate left, you would curl left, then curl right. If you did a curl fate right, you would curl right, then curl left. So if it's helpful for you to use like more specific language like that instead of direction called opposite direction is sometimes confusing, just use your right and left if you find that helpful. And then also to what we talked about earlier, rewrite definitions so they make sense to you first for your own learning and understanding, like rephrase them in a way that helps you understand what the definition means, and then uh, follow up with matching it up with your club or team's terminology. So for example, the SSD dictionary uses odds and evens in moves where odds will perform a move a certain way and evens will perform a move the other way. So like a wave curl, for example, odds curl left, evens curl right is the default. But say your club uses ones and twos as the labels instead of odds and evens, you could reword the definition to use ones and twos so that it matches up with your club's terminology. Or another example is ladder is an SSD move where you curl comb one direction on the first go and then you curl comb in the opposite direction on the second go. This could be rewritten as just a curl comb fade with two goes. So just kind of think about like, how does my clever team phrase stuff? Can I rewrite the definition in a way that matches up to that? And also in a way that makes sense to me and my own kind of like style of learning. All right, so those are my tips for that, kind of looking at what kind of learning has worked well for you in the past. How can you apply it to learning dressage? What does your brain like when it comes to learning these stuff? All right, let's look at what things you can learn by yourself, so learning solo, or what kind of aspects of dressage do you really need other people there in order to like gain a better understanding? All right, so let's look first at what do you need other riders for? So the big three that I could think of was gaps. It's kind of hard to practice gaps if you don't have somebody riding in front of you to practice gaps with. Uh, alignment, so alignment in a comb, in a circle, in big meter shapes on slants. If you don't have a lead rider to look at, kind of hard to practice alignment by yourself. And then another one is go timing. So that is when an instructor calls a move and you hear that go, you go. You don't have an instructor calling moves for you, kind of hard to do that by yourself. But even keeping that in mind, um, you can still, for example, with gaps in alignment, you can still think about, well, how do I understand screen delay well? Do I understand why I need to keep these gaps in alignment? So you can kind of think about that. Even if you can't practice in the arena, you can understand how screen delay affects gaps in alignment. And then also to like say for example, if there's a specific shape to ride, so say you were doing a pinwheel or like eclipse, I have eclipse here, it's like a big meter shape, and you need to be aligned to someone in that pinwheel or in that eclipse, you could just practice riding the shape so that uh, when you do ride with others, your understanding of the shape is very solid, so then you can just really focus on your alignment. Another example is say you were learning revolves. You do revolves with a partner generally, but you could practice the shapes used in the revolve. So for example, like a snowman revolve or a combo revolve or a keyhole revolve. You could practice the shape by yourself, like how it feels to approach the center line, do the move, so that when you do ride with a partner, like with your club or team, and you guys are doing revolves, you already really understand how the move works if it is a revolve. So then you can just really focus on your alignment across to your partner or what gaps you need in the waterfall before you turn and come in. So even if you don't have a reference point in terms of like a lead rider or a partner, you can still practice the other aspects of the move. And then for go timing, it's hard without an instructor there, but say, for example, you know, a song that repeats a lyric or a word very often. So like, for example, like Ghostbusters, you could like ride around the arena, like cut down arena lines or meter lines or what have you. And every time the song, for example, goes Ghostbusters, you do the move that you're practicing. So you're still listening for like a G sound if you speak English, or uh, depending on what language you speak, what version of Go you use, you find a song that maybe uses that same sound at the start of the word. You're just listening for that G in English, and then you go when you hear it. You're listening to music. You might get tired of the song after a while, but maybe you don't practice that for too long. But that's a way you could practice go timing without an instructor. All right, let's talk now about what aspects of dressage you can learn on your own. So a big one is the arena. So here I have a overview of the arena. So if you understand well how things are labeled in the arena, this can make it easier for you when an instructor is teaching, because if they are referring to certain parts of the arena, you know what they're talking about. And for example, also in routines, if there's a lot of point-based writing happening, or the instructor is like, oh yeah, you're gonna start this section here and end this section here, you know what they're talking about. So this is the kind of like the basic terminology that SSD uses. But again, your club or team may have different labels. So in SSD, we have like the center line and the midline. You have your wide tier, your quarter line, your eighth line, your wall line. This repeats on the other side. And then you have your meter lines here, and then your wall letters. But if your club or team uses different terms for all of this, you would translate that. You would maybe take your own top-down view of the arena and relabel it with the terms your club or team uses. But then this way again, as you're learning with the group, your instructor's like, oh yeah, we're gonna ride from the 20-meter line on B side of the, you're gonna be on B side of the arena at the 20-meter line, and then you're gonna travel in a slant down to the 20-meter line on E side of the arena. You're like, I know what that means. I know where I need to be. So just your understanding of the arena can kind of help speed up your learning. Also, to what I find helpful is if you look at the top-down view of the arena, you've got the midline and the center line, and then you have your letter dies. so the one that runs from M to K and F to H. This splits the arena into 8 sections. So especially when you're starting to learn slants and slant math, if you know well where your walls are, so B, E, C, and A, and then your four corners F, K, H, and M, it can help you understand slant math a little better because you know how far you need to turn in relation to your two slant moves. So yeah, just a good understanding of the arena can help a lot. I see that Nova is typing. Don't know if you have a comment or a question. Just wait a second just in case. Two people typing. Um, and also too, what's good. Okay, no worries, Nova. Thank you for coming. If you're learning big meter shapes like this here, this diagram, so your eclipses, your half eights, full eights, quarter half eights, et cetera, uh, being able to understand where the points are in the arena. So if your instructor is communicating to you, oh yeah, you're gonna start your eclipse from E midline and it's gonna go all the way across to B midline, you're like, yes, I know what that means. The top of your 10-meter half moon is gonna be on 10-meter C center line. Yes, I understand. So it kind of helps you. It helps me visualize shapes better if I know where my lines are in the arena. So hopefully it can help you as well. Um, Other thing as well that you can learn on your own is the kind of like the 8 base moves that make up the majority of dressage that are not large meter shapes. So this is um, your comb, your curl over, your keyhole, and your curl. So your 4 moves that return you to like a straight line, and then your slant, your back slant, your fish, and your ribbon, or your 4 slant moves. So when you put these 8 moves together, it creates like a whole pizza or a whole pie like this, and you can make many, many combinations of these moves. So if you think about some moves in the SSD dictionary, for example, um, a fortune is a curl plus a keyhole in the opposite direction, or there's some other moves. There's like pin, I think, is a curl plus a fish in the opposite direction, or like so like you can create many combinations of moves if you understand how these 8 work together. Another example is you could take like clover, which is those 4 keyholes in a left, right, right, left pattern, but you could change out the keyholes for something else. So for example, you could do a fish clover. You could do 4 fishes in a left, right, right, left pattern. So if you understand these 8, it can help you kind of understand more complex moves in any dictionary that you're looking at, if you understand how these work together. All right, let's go back up to this one. Um, Another one, we've already talked about this, but like large meter shapes. So if you understand how well, if you go back a little further, so like if you understand the meter system and how circles work, then you can break those circles down into moons, and then you can put these all around the arena. You can ride these on your own. So if you understand how each moon works or each circle, so like these are two 10-meter circles here with the yellow dots, then you can place them in the arena and practice riding them anywhere in the arena. So this is something you can um, practice on your own. And then you can also change these shapes. So they don't always have to be circles. You can make them boxes, you can make them diamonds, you can make them ovals. But as long as you understand the meter system, you can kind of just play with that and create shapes in the arena. Another thing that you can practice on your own is kind of like overarching theory and concepts. So you can think about transitional timing versus point-based writing. So transitional timing, for example, say you were doing a triple curl, depending on your instructor's preference in your club or team, maybe they give you 3 goes. So 1 go for the walk curl, a 2nd go for the trot curl, a 3rd go for the canter curl. Or maybe they prefer transitional timing, whereas as your saddle is straight or whatever marker they give you, you change to the next gate or the next part of the move. You also have point-based writing. So this is where, like we were talking about it earlier. So say, for example, here your instructor was like, you're going to ride a half 8 from K corner to F corner. This is point-based writing. So they're giving you 2 points. You're going from this spot to this spot, and you're doing this. So then you would understand, okay, I need to start this move from this point, F, wall letter F, and I'm traveling all the way across to wall letter K. So that's also something that you can learn on your own, like as a concept. Like we talked about earlier, even if you can't practice gaps and alignment, if you understand screen delay, when you are writing with other people, you're like, okay, I know how screen delay works. I know what gate I need to use for this alignment, or what I need to look for to maintain alignment at this gate. Uh, what does a boss gap look like if I'm riding behind someone, that sort of thing. Another thing you can look at as well is if you are uh, riding moves at different gates. So for example, this amount of space a walk curl takes is a lot smaller than the amount of space an extended canter curl takes. So I think when most people are trying to learn, they work at the trot a lot, but try working at different gates. So explore the walk, the canter, the extended canter, the gallop, the fastest you can go, backing up, and see how much space the different gates take up in the arena. Um, this also makes you more comfortable with them. So then, if your instructor does want you guys to work at a different gate, or maybe you are doing a routine where you have to move at something other than a trot, you're already comfortable with how that feels because you've been practicing it in the arena. Um, and then another thing, another concept you can think about is how different parts of dressage interact with each other. So one example of this is when you learn comb alignment at the walk, trot, canter, extended canter, backup, etc. The alignment that you keep for those can then translate to being aligned in the circle to being aligned in the slant. So how do these things connect to each other? Oh, Parissa, I think these shapes are also on the SSD dictionary. I'm pretty sure this is where I got them from. But once you learn how moons work, you can create infinite combination. So like for example, this quarter half eight is essentially just a quarter moon dodge. I could add another one on here and it would become a quarter moon squiggle. So you can just make any combination of shapes that you want. This full eight, you could write it as like a giant curl fate. So like you could enter from this position here and ride the first big circle to the left and then the first big circle to the right, or you could write it as a combo. So for example, if you enter it from here, you could ride a giant curl over, then you ride the full circle in the opposite direction, and then you come back and you do your last curl over. So you can enter it any way you like. You could have, this is fun too, if you have a line entering here, your odds could start to the left, and then your evens start to the right, and then they switch. So like they're doing a wave fate, but with this big meter shape. So once you understand how they work, you can basically do whatever you want with them. It's open to interpretation. There's no like right way to do it. Yeah. Um, Alrighty. And then the last little bit on this slide here is some exercises you can do by yourself. So for transitional timing, what you could do is do a bunch of curl overs. So that's like half a curl or a U-turn, and you just do them across the arena, and you just practice that as my saddle is straight, like I've completely turned around and I'm facing the opposite wall. I do my next one, and my next one, and my next one. You could start at the walk, and then do some at the trot, canter, extended canter, etc. Kind of explore how much space does it take with each gate, get comfortable at transitioning, because especially when you're moving more quickly, your brain kind of panics and goes, I'm moving so fast. But if you do it over and over and over, you just kind of get used to it. You can also practice transitioning between two gates that are not next to each other. So, for example, you could do a walk into a canter, into a walk into a canter. So then you have to think about how do I tap my keys nicely so that there's no trot stride in the middle. Um, Another thing is for point-based timing, you could think about doing a bunch of keyholes across the arena. So for example, like if you started here and then you did a keyhole left as you reach this meter line, and then you're traveling. So like as your front hooves reach, you keyhole left, and then you get to this meter line, your front hooves reach, you keyhole right the opposite direction. You keep going, front hooves reach, keyhole left, front hooves reach, keyhole right. So you do that over and over and over. So you're really focusing on as my front hooves are over this line, I do the move, or as my saddle is over, or my tail is over. You can explore different markers like that because often in routines, whoever's instructing will say, when this part of your horse's body is over this point, you do this. So you can practice that on your own. So you kind of get comfortable for looking for that marker for the point-based timing. You can also practice your tempo. So this is when you're riding either big shapes like this or just in regular circles. In order to keep a nice curve shape, you want to think about the tempo that you tap your keys at. So generally, the slower you are moving and the bigger the circle, the slower your tempo. So this is how often you tap your turn key. And then the faster you are moving and the smaller the circle, the faster you need to tap your turn key. So you can just practice on riding circles or riding big meter shapes and really thinking about how often do I need to tap my turn key to make that nice curved shape. So it looks like a circle or a moon and not a straight line because the straight lines are easier to ride. The curved lines are trickier. So you can practice that by yourself. Um, Another thing is muscle memory. So if you guys have ridden routines or if there's one move that your instructor really loves, you know that if you do it enough times, you could kind of do it in your sleep. Your muscle memory is there, your fingers just tap the keys without you really paying attention. So if there's one move that you're like, oh, I often make mistakes here, you can practice it by yourself. And you can also practice it section by section. So we talked about clover earlier, which is those four keyholes in a left, right, right, left pattern or a right, left, left, right pattern. If that is a move that confuses you, you could practice it on your own. So what I would recommend here is start with the first section of the move, get a handle on that, add in the second section, practice those two together, add in the third section, practice those first three together, and then finally add in the fourth section and practice it all together. So you're kind of like building yourself up to the whole move, starting with the first little bit. And then the last little thing you can do by yourself as like a dressage exercise is you could watch a YouTube video where they are showing moves. Usually though they'll write what the move is in the corner. So if you can like hide that from yourself, maybe put a sticky note over it so you can't see what move they're doing and try to guess what they're doing. Like, oh, it kind of looks like they're doing a dodge here, or that looked like a miss. And then you can then go back and rewatch and see, okay, I was right. That is exactly what they're doing. Or say, for example, you're watching a routine, they won't write what moves they're using on the video. Try to guess what they're doing. And then like try to write down like, oh, I think maybe they're doing a rotary here, and it looks like they did a curl revolve here. Um, so try to like see if you can guess what they're doing, and then you can also try to recreate the moves by yourself in the arena. Kind of like challenge yourself in that way. Alrighty, those are some examples. Okay, forgot I have more slides here. Okay, let's talk about tracking your progress. So this is kind of like to help yourself stay motivated over time. Um, so you can record yourself practicing. So just from like your point of view in the arena, if you have like OBS or something else to record, like what is it? There's like the Microsoft Game Bar, Xbox Game Bar, whatever it's called. You can record yourself and then you can watch back and because sometimes, like when you're really focused in the moment, you might miss small things. If you watch yourself back later, you can go, oh, yeah, I should have maybe started that move, that section of the move a little earlier or a little later, that sort of thing. If you have an alt account or you have a friend and you're like, hey, if you're not busy, can you just park your account, your pony in the riding arena and film me for 30 minutes? Like, you don't have to be like watching me. If you could just film me, that would be great. And then you can kind of get like an outside perspective, like more of like an instructor point of view, or they could film you even from like the top down fourth camera angle if you're practicing like circles, for example. So then you can kind of see that instructor point of view. So if an instructor is like correcting you, you can kind of understand what they're seeing versus what you see as you're writing. And then once you have that recording, you can ask others to watch it and give you any tips. So, say for example, you have a friend who's really good at dressage, and maybe you've been working really hard on learning this certain aspect, and you're like, hey, like I took a recording of myself. Could you watch it? Give me some tips. Like, do you notice anything? Maybe if you have an instructor that you really like, you could ask them the same thing. Or if you're in a dressage community server like SSD here, if they have like a media channel, you could pop your video in there. Maybe you upload it to YouTube, be like, hey, I was trying to learn how to do this move. Can you guys give me some tips? I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. That sort of thing. Generally, people are quite helpful and will help you out. Um, The last thing I encourage you to do is, if you're really interested in learning by yourself, is keep a dressage journal. So this could be like you're actually physically writing it down in a book, like a paper thing. Old technology, I know at this point. On your phone, on your laptop maybe, or maybe you just do voice notes. And then if you have a moment when you're feeling discouraged, like, oh my goodness, like I'm not learning anything, you can go back and look at your journal or listen to your journal and go, actually, wow, look at all the progress I've made. I've gotten so much better at this part of dressage. Kind of keep yourself motivated over time. Maybe you can give yourself little gold stars. You get some cute stickers. Give yourself little gold stars as you go, as you learn new stuff. Alrighty, next section. So we've talked about this a little bit already, but how can you transfer your new skills to how dressage is done in your club or team? So what I consciously do now when I'm learning new stuff is I'm automatically translating it to the language that my club uses. So Crystal Pirates uses a variation of the modifier method. So I don't think in terms of like that earlier example ladder. I just think curl comb fade, or like ruffle. I think ribbon fade. So like I'm just so used to like how my club calls stuff, I just automatically translate stuff in my head. As you learn more on your own and you get more used to how your club or team labels stuff or explain stuff, you will start to do that as well. But I highly encourage when you're first starting to like actually write it down. That helps you remember better. Draw your own diagrams, that sort of thing. Another example of this is like wave is the terminology used in the SSD dictionary. Like feather is a comb wave, but some clubs and teams use split instead of wave. So they'll say like, oh, we are doing a split curl or a split comb, or we are doing a split belt at wall instead of a waterfall. So just make sure that you're rewriting the definitions so that they make sense with how your club or team explains things. What's fun too is if you're in multiple clubs or teams and everybody talks about dressage in a different way. So then you get to keep all these different ways of explaining in your head, or hopefully you have them written down. Maybe you have like a little master book or document of translations. Like, okay, in this team we call a wave comb a feather. In this team, we call a wave comb a split comb, etc., etc., etc. So you kind of keep track how everybody talks about dressage. I think it's so interesting that everybody kind of has their own unique way. It's really cool. It's like we all have our own unique dialect of dressage. It's really interesting. Um, and then as you're learning new stuff, master's degree on SSO dressage. That's so real. um, can you place it within the context of what you've already learned with your clever team? Abby says one of my teams uses when front hooves touch transitional timing. Yep. Uh, or like when your saddle is straight, or before the state mechanics change, it would be like when you are a stride away from being straight. Yeah, it's really interesting how everybody kind of like explains stuff differently. Really cool. Um, but as you're learning new stuff, can you think about, oh, how does this fit into what I've learned with my clever team? So say like your clever team just started learning circles and you were really gung ho and you're like, I want to know more about circles. So you go and look and you're like, oh, there's these things called moons. This is really cool. Okay, this fits in with what I learned about circles. They kind of go together. And then maybe you really loved learning about moons on your own and you asked your instructor, hey, like, do you know about this? Could you maybe teach everyone this next time? Or I found some cool resources here if you would like them. Um, so yeah, how does what you learn on your own fit in with the context of your club or team? And then yeah, maybe you can encourage to learn about that with everyone. And if you needed to do gaps alignment, but you're all by yourself, you're like, I had no friends to do this with, maybe your instructor could go, oh yeah, we'll do a lesson about revolves, for example, and then you will have a partner. Or we will work in a tight rein, and then you will have a partner to do tight rein stuff with, like crescents and stirs. Um, so yeah, how can you kind of think about how does this fit into with what I've already done with my club routine? Alrighty, change to different language. Uh, yeah, I haven't tried to teach in French. I should probably like try to do that. I don't know the terms in French. I would have to learn them. That's my challenge. I gotta learn the dressage terms in French because they're not the same as in English. Okay, let's move over to the last little bit. So this is about if you do instruct or you're interested in instructing, how would you translate your new knowledge to instructing other people? How do you telepathically send this information from your brain to theirs. No, how do you explain it? How do you explain it out loud? So I think the big thing is the difference between the rider brain. So when you are just riding in the arena, learning on your own, or listening to an instructor explaining stuff, versus the instructing brain. So what I find is, as an instructor, you are generally thinking about the bigger picture. So how aspects of dressage interact with each other and the theory that is underpinning everything. Whereas generally, when you're just learning, uh, more so when you're just learning from someone else, you're just kind of listening and you're taking in what they're telling you and then you're trying it, but you're not thinking about everything at the same time. Um, so keep in mind what stage of learning your members are at. So kind of like if you're really gung ho and you've gone like into super complex stuff, say for example, you went into a deep dive into pinwheels and you're like, oh my goodness, this was so fun. I really want to teach my club or team members about pinwheels. But say they don't know what circles are yet. They haven't learned circles yet. They're not going to do too well at pinwheels. So think about, okay, what do they need to learn first in order to learn this new thing that I've been exploring? So like, don't assume they have the same knowledge as you. Be ready to work from the very basics and then increase complexity over time, especially with new concepts or things that are less common or like weird. Um, So like one example of this is like there's those YouTube videos where like an expert teaches the same concept to somebody in kindergarten, somebody in middle school, somebody in high school, and then a college student who is like majoring in that subject. So how do you adapt the new information based on their existing level of knowledge? So like say you had some baby riders who just joined your club. You want to teach them pinwheels? Maybe start with teaching them circles first in the meter system. But maybe you have a competition team, you know they're pros, they already understand how pinwheels work, and you're like, okay, we are going to do rotary pinwheels. We are going to do a star-shaped pinwheel. We are going to do a pinwheel that moves across the arena, like the X moves from C to A, for example. So think about what do they already know? What can you feasibly teach them? Do you need to teach them some other stuff first? That sort of thing. And then like you've been doing by yourself, make sure you are translating the new material using the terminology employed by your club or team. So, as you're working with your members, you build this shared language or dialect together of how moves are described. If you use modifiers, for example, um, if you like some people don't think of some clubs and teams don't use like arena lines and meter lines. They use like a grid system instead. Like it'll be like, oh yeah, from A1 to like C3, you're gonna do this move. So translate it to how your club or team talks about dressage, because otherwise, if you're just directly taking a definition or an explanation from elsewhere without translating, it's going to be confusing to them because they're going to be like, "What are you talking about? This is not how we talk about dressage." So just make sure you're translating, um, that sort of thing. Also, too, you can keep in mind which lesson plans or sections of your curriculum this new material can be added into. So if you've just learned some new slant moves, for example, maybe you have a lesson plan on slants that you're working on or that you've used previously. You could add them in there, or maybe there's a section of the curriculum where your members learn slants. You could add them in there, or you could rework them so they make sense with your lesson plan or curriculum. Um, if you've learned something new and you're not sure about how you would teach it to your members, ask other instructors. Be like, hey, I was putzing around on the internet and I saw this cool dressage thing, but I have never taught it before. I have no idea how I would go about teaching this thing. Ask other instructors for help. Um, be like, have you taught this thing before? What did you find worked well? What didn't work so well? Can you give me some tips? Do you have like some diagrams that you would recommend? Or maybe a video that you would recommend? That sort of thing. Next thing here is like tap into your creativity. The sky is the limit. Like you can just break the rules as you get more comfortable uh, in your instructing, you grow more confident, all that good jazz. You will just get more creative over time and you will have greater success at combining dressage concepts together, like mashing them together and making a cursed child that comes out of that. And then you'll come up with new moves or ideas based on what you're learning. So, for example, if you're in a rotary, like you're in a circle and there's two layers of the circle that are moving in opposite directions, you could do a revolve from that. You could have your two rotary circles comb towards each other, they do a revolve, and then they trade circle sizes, for example. Like we talked about earlier, pinwheels don't always need to be a circle. They can be a star shape, they can be a box, they can be a diamond, they can be an oval, they could be a parallelogram. You can do whatever you want. It's endless, the options. And then also too, I feel like as you learn more by yourself, or if you have the chance to go to open lessons outside of your Clever team, whether it's in another Clever team's open server or a community server, you're learning from other instructors, or maybe you're asking them for help through DMs, that sort of thing. You're also going to learn new ways to explain moves or concepts to your members. So you'll kind of like grow that skill as well. Like, what are the many ways I can explain this thing? Because everybody learns differently. And then the final thing I want to say here is don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're a normal part of learning. So if you like learn this, maybe you watched a routine and you're like, wow, that was amazing. That looks so cool. I think I understand how they did that, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to try it with my Clever team, but just be upfront with them and say, hey, I saw this really cool thing. Let's watch it together. I think this is how it works. Let's try it. And if we make mistakes, that's fine. If I make a mistake explaining it, that's fine. It's a normal part of learning. But you won't know until you try it. So you gotta make mistakes. You gotta try the thing to see if it works, right? So yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to own up to your mistakes if you make them, because that also encourages your members to be more comfortable with making mistakes. So yes, I think that's kind of like the most fun bit of like learning by yourself. Is you find something really weird and you're like, you know what? Let's try it, or can we make it weirder? Let's add something else and make it even more strange. And then you really hurt your brains trying to figure out what's going on. But it's great. That's the fun part of dressage. When your brain hurts, you know you're doing it right. Alrighty. So that is the last little bit of me yapping at you guys. So thank you for attending this clinic. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the stage chat now. Or if you think of a question later, you can DM me on Discord or on Instagram. If you have any suggestions for future clinics you would like to see, or um, lessons, you can DM me as well.